Okay, first up we have Shaka. Alright, so yeah, this came together really well. A lot of good elements. It looks clean, it looks very professional. Might have let the logo come to rest and hold it for a moment rather than fade out before it stops. I think you've improved the way the bullets sort of wipe the text across the screen, and that works really well. I think the one opportunity here that may have been missed was I think it might have been better to show this text first um, and then blow the bullet hole in it with a sound effect. It's okay as it is. I just thought that might have been more dynamic and exciting. But yeah, it's very very good work. Really clean and professional looking. Next up is Samantha. Okay. So yeah, definitely some improvements here. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess not too much to change on this opener. Um, I think one thing that's weird is it looks like the door is swinging through a mask somehow. Like it's like when it goes forward, it looks um, like the outline here doesn't change, but the door, sort of moves through it. Like there's a mask there. So I would check that, and if there is a mask that cuts that off, then that should be, parented to the door or whatever's being animated, and then you should move those together um, because that looks kind of weird. Maybe a little subtle movement on this one to kind of keep it alive, like it's the air from the other one is pushing it. But I think the movement's better. Um, I think you had these fading up before, if I remember correctly. We talked about damaging the text, and I would just get there in Photoshop and put little just nicks, here and there and scratches and stuff like that. This spacing looks a little weird, and I probably wouldn't have a colon in a film title. Um, yeah, then fade out the end's good. So yeah, I think it came together well. We've got a lot of good elements. I think that mask on the door thing is the most noticeable fix. You can make a few other nice touches to it as well. Next up is Faith. Okay, so yeah, a lot of good additions here. I think that the glowing's good. I might have had it affect the outside of the pumpkin less, so it more appears to be coming from the inside. It seems like it affects the area around it more than it needs to. Maybe just if the inside was glowing. Kind of noticing it here, I guess. And then as far as that squishing, I would have left the bottom still and just had the top squished. I'm not sure what you use. It looks like it's just scaling down a little bit, and if you move the anchor point down to the bottom, I believe it would scale from there and just move the top down but leave the bottom in place, and that might have been better. for that. So you've got that flash there, and I think it's weird how these don't look necessarily integrated with the O because they're at sort of different levels of transparency. So might kind of make sure that. So I guess first of all, I would before I did the flash, I would make sure these are fully opaque, and then add that, and then when it fades down, make sure it's all one image together and fading down together. You could pre-comp it, for example, and fade down the pre-comp thing or something like that would help. And then just make sure you have a fade out at the end, both for the visual and the audio. Next up is Kasha. Okay, so yeah, it's somewhat improved. I think the light swinging maybe doesn't last long enough. Make sure to put it easy ease. I think you have I see that you've moved the anchor point, but it still seems to be at an odd position. I would just make sure it's exactly straight up from this, because right now the way it's rotating, it looks like it's almost like more over here, and it's kind of rotating around it here rather than straight up from there and kind of rotating around that as a pivot point. And this goes on for too long, so I would speed that all up, because here you are, we're at 13 seconds and all we've seen is the light bulb move around, and that's much too long. Probably just like 3 or 4 seconds would probably be enough, 3, 4, 5 seconds. And that text is all right, and it works with the light bulb, but you didn't get a movie title in there, so it's sort of incomplete. So we just had a logo thing, but not the movie title. Next up is Justin. Okay, definitely some improvements here. I think the way the eyeball moves is better. I think what would be better still is move, stop, rather than the kind of constant back and forth. It's like eyes kind of dart around. They kind of move very quickly and then they freeze in position. And so, but this is kind of constantly moving, like the handle jiggle. That's good. This is okay. I feel like the text is a bit thin. It's having a hard time holding up. And I'm not really sure that this text spreading out effect is doing much for you. I think starting them all overlapped is maybe not a great choice. Like, I think if you started here and just did like very slowly moved, like if you started kind of tight and just did a long slow thing like that, that can look kind of good. But I think starting here just, I don't know, looks sort of jumbled and strange, and I don't think it does much for you. And then this is good. I mean, the text is clear. I might have moved it down a little bit because it's pretty high in the frame. But yeah, that works okay. Not a lot of sort of animation or effects on the title, but it works all right. It could have been interesting to do some camera movement at the end, maybe have the camera kind of moving in closer or something, just to kind of keep it alive a little bit more. But you've got good clear images, and it comes together all right. I might have just actually moved this down and used white text. I think it would pop more. I mean, it's such a high contrast image with all this black and then the kind of 100% white. It's very, and so your eyes are kind of drawn to this sort of high contrast area. I mean, the red adds color contrast, so that helps, but maybe toning down the brightness of the background would help the text pop more. And somehow, I don't know, red text is usually discouraged, so I might try just white. And then if this was a little darker or kind of more yellowy orange, like a sunset, and then that was bright white, it would pop the text out a little bit more, which is what you most want people to see. Next up is Herminia. Oh, it's interesting. So there's definitely some improvements here. I think you did something different with the text, and that works all right. The horse is pretty crazy, um, hence the name. And I think this is interesting. It's kind of funny in a way, just because they're swaying, almost dancing back and forth. So I think it's interesting. Um, but it came out kind of humorous, which is okay. I don't know if that was the intention or not. I think you got a little tight with the text close to the edges. I might kind of give yourself a little bit more, room. Maybe scale it down a little bit or move it down some. But it's good that you got some movement on the end. So yeah, it all came together all right. Next up is Tara, and I think you used Apple ProRes codec, which is not something I would recommend, and I can't play it with VLC or QuickTime on this computer, so use H.264 or just make an MP4 file. That's fine too for future submissions. All right, so that came out well. A lot of improvements here. I think the handle falls better. I feel like it's a little odd that oh geez, it's not like the door shots. If first it just rotates from the center, and then it falls, and that it's not that convincing of something falling. I might have just skipped the rotation and just had it fall. That might have been better. I like the way the door fades out and the text comes in. Oh, it's not really turning my volume all the way down. There we go. I like the timing of the audio here, actually, where that movement really goes well with the sound there. So, and yeah, you've done some interesting stuff with the text and the thoughtful placement of the images and the text. So it came together nicely. So just you need a fade out of both the audio and the video at the end. Next up is Peter. Okay. So I think this is all right. I think the text looks a little dim. I might have it, fade up and kind of hold for a moment before it fades back down again. So you could speed up the fade, and then you'd have more time to do that, to hold a little bit longer. I think this is interesting. I'm not sure where you got the crow flying. I feel like if you're going to have it in there, you kind of want to see more frames of it because it's pretty choppy. I think the frames you have look good. And then I would try this by Pete Becker. Looks very sort of I don't know, just a very pedestrian kind of almost sort of default looking font. I might try something different. Like maybe you just use the same font you use for Red Noon. That could work. Or but right now it sort of stands out as not fitting into the look of the rest of it. I think the Red Noon works well as a choice. And just make sure you fade everything down at the end. Next up is Stephanie. Okay, yeah, definitely some improvements and changes here. I think the card has gotten better. I feel like this is a little crowded to the edge, but I guess those are kind of close to the corners. They just look maybe a little too close, but it's fine. I think this is good, except for that it just fades too quickly. I just think you need to hold it, for a moment, a couple seconds before it fades out. And I would have tried a different font here. You know, it looks like Comic Sans. It might not be Comic Sans, but the Comic Sans is very frowned upon font. You should Google it, and you'll find a lot of commentary on that. And so even if it's not Comic Sans, it's a bit close to it. And again, I generally discourage outlines on text. They're also sort of frowned upon in the design community. And I thought this was good conceptually, but I think maybe you want to kind of wipe it from right to left so that it's like first it chops up this one and then it chops up some of those. So if you just did a mask for the chopped up version of the test that wiped from left to right to reveal it, within the motion of the scissors, I thought that would be a better transition. Also, I think if you're going to do that, I wouldn't keep the solid text on there at the same time. I would have that be replaced by the other text rather than having both there at the same time. I thought this was clever, and I just thought the motion felt a little kind of choppy and a little jumpy, and I thought if it could be smoothed out maybe by changing the keyframes to do the easy ease thing. It might slow down and speed up if you do that. It's the only problem, but right now it's a little jarringly changing direction, so smoothing that out would be good. But I think it's a very good concept, and other than it feeling a little jumpy, pretty well executed. So yeah, and then like I said with the others, make sure it's fading down at the end. So or was it? I don't think it did it? Oh, it does fade down. Pardon me. Yeah, forgot that. So yeah, good work on that. Next up is Gabrielle. Nice. So yeah, definitely some improvements here. I think the way you've connected the dots looks much better and smoother. Nice work with that. I think that something with the Polaris is tricky is just to kind of want it to stand out from the background more, because these stars are fairly big and bright. And I was thinking maybe if as the Polaris fade up, maybe if that dimmed a little bit, that would help it. But right now it's just the whole frame looks a bit busy because of these very bright, very big stars compared to the size of the text. So that could be something to play with. Maybe dimming it or coming up with a different solution. And yeah, the snake, I thought that was a pretty clever animation. I'm not sure how you did it, but it worked out pretty well. Snakes can be difficult to do. And then it just sort of ends abruptly, so make sure there's a fade out at the end. And I might have chose a star maybe without the sheriff text on it. Because it's at the top of the screen, it almost makes me think, oh, is that part of the title or somehow? I mean, obviously it's not, but I just think maybe finding a star with like a logo on it rather than the word sheriff might be better. Also, it's kind of in a very different style from the snake, which is this very kind of graphic, cartoony thing, and this is more like a photograph. So it might be good to get a more kind of icon of a star that matches the look of the snake rather than two kind of very conflicting looks. So you could try that. But overall, it looks good, and again, just make sure to have the fade out at the end. Next up is Connor. Alright, so yeah, a lot of good stuff going on here. I like this motion at the beginning, and I think the transition to the porcelain production looks good, and the font looks like a good choice. I'm not really a fan of when letters press against each other like that, so I might look to kind of just adjust the kerning on that a little bit. And then the other thing is that it would be better if this sort of cloud changing movement continued through the fade rather than stop abruptly. And then this is an interesting effect, and you know, works good. I think that cut was a little surprising. So maybe if not have it cutting there, it would be better, and can just continue the motion. Don't really love this font. It doesn't really say much. You might try something different. It's okay, but it looks, again, not, I don't know. Maybe go for something more Western looking somehow. Or, yeah, I might just try something different. And also, it looks like you have two different sizes here, which I think looks a little odd, and I think they're sort of not different enough, you know. Although this, you know, this font might look better if you did all caps. You might want to see how you like it with all caps instead. And then the audio transition wasn't so great. So it cuts out completely and then comes in, and I think it'd be better if it faded out the audio. And then same thing at the end. Make sure the audio and the visual both fade at the end. And right now it's just an abrupt cut. Next up is Anthony. Alright, some interesting elements going on there. So just to be clear, that throat clearing was not me. That was in the recording of the audio. So I guess, yeah, it's interesting. I think that, you know, this doesn't fill up the frame, which isn't necessarily a problem. It's a bit of a busy image that's a little bit hard to read. But I guess, and it's also blurry, and I'm not sure why that looks sort of blurry. Maybe it's just the size thing if we look at it. Anyway, I'm not sure, but I think because this doesn't fill up the screen, you have the opportunity to use the rest of the screen to put Red Canary Productions here, because it just, especially right here where you have the kind of dark text on the dark background, it gets lost there. I mean, the other thing you could have done is had this kind of pink sort of fading in and out color fill the rest of the screen, but and then you know Red Canary Productions or something. You can make it much bigger and more prominent, and right now it's a little hard to read and getting lost down there. So I try to do something different with that text. And then same problem here. I mean, that's barely legible because it's moving at a weird uneven pace, and then it quickly fades out. It's like it's just, that's not working, that text. It's too fast, and it shouldn't be over this image. I think you should use some of the rest of your screen real estate for that kind of thing. There's some interesting effects on it, and again, pretty busy image and text that gets a little bit lost in the image. So I think, you know, you could, if you had black text over this, for example, it would really pop because it's such a bright background, and black text would, you know, be high contrast there. So I think, you know, try something different with the text, and you know, think about having some sort of motion in the final image. Next up is Christopher. Okay, so yeah, definitely some improvements on this one. Simple, but it's pretty clean, and I think that's good. I think it's kind of odd how the text just kind of suddenly disappears while this is slowly fading out. I might have done a fade out on the text on the bullet as well. I like this with the foreground and the background moving separately. I think that works really well, and you know, you've chosen a good spot to put your text there where it pops out from the background. I think this is pretty good. I think it's sort of, there's some strangeness how I didn't really catch it. I think just the way the red and the white is separate. I don't think it's reading that well. I would keep it all together. I think it's a little odd how that's separate. I like that the bullet hole comes up separately there, and then especially on the fade out, it's weird that we're seeing the red through the white now. I'm not sure. I like that. I guess it's okay. Maybe it's just preference. And it seems like the video fades out, but it's the sound. Yeah, make sure the sound fades out as well. Next up is Terrence. Okay, so yeah, I think this is definitely improved. Um, I thought that, the text effect is interesting, although I thought the beer going across the frame was an interesting opportunity to have that be sort of a wipe that made the letters appear, but, just an artistic choice. You could obviously go either way. I think it's a little odd that you've got this bottle on the counter, and it's almost like, first of all, it's too small compared to the beer stein, and also this goes right over it, which makes it feel like it's not even an object in the scene. So I think that, if you're going to have the bottle there, make sure it's scaled correctly and that, it doesn't intersect with that other object. And also, don't get your text so tight to the edge of the screen. Give yourself, scale it down a little bit so maybe there's more space on the sides, and that's a pretty big space between the text there. I might go for something a little closer together. I think that works fine. There was some kind of little glitch there. Just that thing suddenly appears, and I guess to me it should either be there the whole time, or not there the whole time. But I think it should be there the whole time. I'm guessing that was just a little error you made. Maybe the layer wasn't the full length of the sequence. And then yeah, that's okay, but again, I think you get too tight on the edge there, so I might maybe have that go in and give yourself a little bit more time to do it. And I think because the main motion is the beer mug sliding across, it might be interesting to kind of repeat that to get these to appear from the other direction. You could slide another one, but that's not absolutely necessary. It was just a thought. But overall, yeah, I think it looks good, has a nice consistent look, so good work on that. Next up is Henri. Yes, there's a lot of really good stuff going on here. Definitely a number of improvements. Really like the moving background and the sky, the different layers. I mentioned, it might be better to have the grasses moving more consistently just because, wind's going to blow them all the same way and they look almost too bouncy. I might kind of just get a little more subtle with the movement, not quite so much back and forth, but maybe just like one sort of wind gust that kind of blows them and then they react rather than the sort of back and forth and back and forth. But that's all right. You might have done more. You could do more. I really like that you have the different layers with a different depth, but I think that the background mountains are big enough and should be far enough that I think that difference should be greater. So if you did this with 3D layers, push it back even further and scale it even bigger to increase that effect. But still, it's cool you did that at all. And then this is good. I like the whole book turning thing. I think maybe you could have held a little bit longer on this title because it goes by so fast before we start seeing all this stuff. And I like the flipping pages. I do wish there was some variety between the various aged pages. And it just goes fast, so you have a limited amount of time. So I think it's great that you're doing so much, but it's just a lot in the time you have. And I guess you're left wondering, like, which ones of these am I supposed to read? Was I supposed to be able to read all of those? Because they go so fast. Um, yeah, but within the 17 seconds, I guess you've done what you can with the time. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So really good work on this. It all comes together really well.